X-Men. You were the X-Men.
You could change your fate, would you? What's up, guys? Welcome back to House of Power. We are here for movie number 7, which is crazy. My name is Kyle. Thanks for checking out Project Potter, guys. We got our Wolverine hat here. We got our X-Men t-shirt. We're going through every live-action X-Men movie. My first time through all these movies except for Logan. And the Deadpool movies, guys, 1, 2, and then obviously Deadpool Wolverine, which I cannot wait for, guys. It is getting closer and closer at the time it's recording. Got tickets for opening night, but guys, what I'm going to do is go through my thoughts on the movie, my favorite character, a score to 10, and then we're going to rank this movie as it stacks up to the first 6 movies. So, guys, appreciate you. And let's jump into the past. This movie, I won't lie, had me hooked from the very beginning. I was so into this movie. I love the aesthetic. I love how there's this literal dark future, but it's got this purple, like these bombs or whatever, this aesthetic. And I'm like, oh, you got me in on the future. And then who do we see? We see OG Magneto, Ian McKellen, who I said looked maybe a little old in the post-credit scene of the Wolverine. Well, he looks good in this one. He looks really good, and he's in his Magneto suit. We got Charles Xavier. Patrick Stewart returns, dude. He's here. He looks great as always. We got Halle Berry back as Storm, and it's like the OG crew is here, dude. And but then it also has a mix of, like, I think Bobby. They have Bobby the Iceman in there, and then they have the Fire dude, who I think is their Cyclops. I forget, but it's just really cool because we have Logan in there, and he looks like he always does, but also this is kind of like future Logan, and he kind of looks the same. Like they say, he doesn't age, but we have some trickery afoot at the beginning where Ellen Page's character, the Walls girl, she's running, and she's doing something to this guy who looks like Thor, and he's got this red cape on, and these creatures are chasing, and they're changing, and we find out they're the Sentinels, and they're chasing Ellen Page, and then Ellen Page at the last second says, "Too late, assholes," and then boom, the scene shifts to like an office building, and I was like, oh, okay, already you got me in, dude. You already got me in with some favorite characters. You got me in. This is almost like multiverse stuff where we got variants or we got time traveling. Is time traveling stuff always confusing? Yes, but is it always cool? Absolutely. So we go back here, guys, and I feel like this was the perfect mix of my complaints about First Class, where I was like, I'm not really feeling this cast. We got a little bit of that, but mixed with the OG cast, I think was such a great mixture. And I talked about how, like, I wasn't really feeling Fassbender's Magneto. I wasn't really feeling McAvoy as Charles Xavier, even though I liked their characters. I didn't like the Beast. And guess what, guys? Logan was the great unifier because he goes back in time because the Sentinels are taking everything over. They took Mystique's DNA and that, like, allowed them to change. And now they can basically take everything out. They can adapt. That's why when, like, Bobby's going after them, they change to a different element or whatever. They change to steel so they can go through and anything that the mutants throw at them, basically, that the Sentinels can go, what's changed? Like Mystique. And it's like, this is a genius idea because Mystique is so powerful and so unique. And I talked about how she's kind of been a cheat code in the past, but someone else wanted to weaponize her DNA. And it's like, how did we not see this? And Tyrion Lannister himself, no. Yes, that is Tyrion. I couldn't remember if it's Tywin or Tyrion. Tywin's the dad. But we got Peter Dinklage in here, Tyrion Lannister, who is Trask, and that just sounds like any generic, like it's like AIM in the Marvel series. It's like it's such a generic, like, this is the bad guy corporation spokesperson, whatever. But Peter Dinklage is there. I think his character is actually really cool, but he is not trying to take over the world. He's just so fascinated with the mutants. And he's like, oh, I want to study them. And he's Mystique, especially. He's like, oh my God, this is so crazy. But what has to happen before utter annihilation? Wolverine goes back in the past, dude, and they want to send Charles Xavier back, but it's tearing apart. Ellen Page is like, I can't send you back that far. It's decades. But and then Wolverine's like, actually, I can regenerate, so send me. And so we get Wolverine in the 70s, dude, and he meets up with McAvoy. First of all, I love when he goes to the mansion and oh, my name's Hank. He's like, I'm sorry, I can't help you right now. And he's like, you're a beast. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, but he's like, I gotta go. And he's like, you sure there's not a little beast in you? And then he, like, kicks down the door or whatever. And then he transforms into Beast and he's going after him. And then he runs into James McAvoy, who's Charles Xavier, and this is after the events of First Class. So he's walking around, and I'm like, oh, he's walking, and Wolverine says, "You're walking," and because he's never seen Charles Xavier walking, and then we find out that he's taking the serum that I think Beast developed, which is super cool. But he takes the serum and it gets rid of his powers, so he can walk, but he can't use his powers. And so it's like, oh, now we have a great conundrum where it's like, do you want to be able to walk and live your life, or do you want to have these mutant powers? And so super cool dynamics already being set up here, right? And I love how Wolverine's going back and he's like, hey, this is gonna be hard to believe, but I'm from the future and you sent me back, future you sent me back to convince you. And they're like, oh, you're full of shit, blah blah blah. Like any time traveling movie, it's always like, okay, this is gonna sound dumb. And it's the old time traveling tropes, but it's handled so well. And I love how McAvoy's down and he's drinking and he is depressed, and they're talking about how he lost Mystique, or he calls her Raven, and he lost Eric and all this stuff. And we find out that Eric tried to, well, originally we thought he would try to assassinate JFK. So he's in like this, he's like, it looks like the Pentagon. He's like way below, like 100 floors down. And then he's in this room similar to Magneto's plastic prison in the OG, except he's down below and there's just glass. I'm kind of skipping around here, but we run into Quicksilver, who I know from WandaVision. And I know that that was a joke. It was a Boner joke. It was Peter Boner. But when he showed up, I didn't have any connection in WandaVision. I knew he was some sort of famous character. And I think I remembered he was Quicksilver, but this universe is Quicksilver, but this is a younger version. And I don't really remember Quicksilver from the OG thing. I feel like we didn't get a lot of him, but maybe I'm just misremembering. But Wolverine's like, oh, he wasn't as young the last time I saw him. But it's funny because I know him from WandaVision now, but obviously people who have already seen X-Men, when he popped up in WandaVision, were like, oh my God, it's Quicksilver from X-Men. I'm like, oh my God, it's the guy from WandaVision. So it's kind of funny the way that works. Days of Future Past, a little time traveling action there. Not really. I don't think that joke makes sense, but hopefully one person laughed at that. We get this absolutely incredible scene, which I think I've seen before online, but I kind of forgot. And they break Eric out. It's really cool because Quicksilver goes in there and he vibrates his hand so quickly that it breaks the glass. And they're going through and they are taking these guys out. Wolverine's got his bone claws again, which is cool, and also not metal. So remember, when he's going against Magneto, he's not getting tossed around like a rag doll. So there's a couple things, and then they get Eric out there and they are escaping, but Quicksilver does that incredible scene where he puts the music on because all these guys are in there, and Magneto starts shaking everything, but they're like, dude, be careful. And then we get this amazing slow-mo where he goes around and he touches everything and he's like taking his time. He's like, And he like moves the bullet around, and it's so cool, dude. It's like one of the coolest things I've ever seen in cinema. And again, I've seen it online somewhere, but I was like, whatever. I probably saw it in passing. But now to have it in the context and to see that's how they get Eric out is so cool. They get up on the plane, and then we get Eric and Charles fighting. But then he's like yelling at Charles because he's like, "No, you abandoned these people when they needed you." And Eric starts getting mad and starts like bending the plane a little bit, and it's like, oh, dude, like Magneto's powers are so cool, but you can see that he's still kind of a tyrant a little bit. And I was like, okay, I thought Eric was cool, but then now he's still kind of like got it in his blood. Like he's always got to like kind of take over and kind of be a dictator. But we find out that he said, I didn't kill JFK. It was the JFK assassination, which was crazy because it's like obviously an iconic moment in American history, infamous moment really. But he's like, I actually didn't kill the president. Charles is like, the bullet curve. He's like, we're not stupid. And he's like, no, I tried to save JFK because he said JFK was a mutant apparently. And I was like, oh, that's a super cool twist. And he's basically got framed for it. And so that's why he's in there. So he didn't do it. He was trying to save them. But that's kind of a microcosm for this movie because, Eric, this was the weird part of this movie for me, where Eric, I guess, kind of goes off on his own, but they're telling him about the future and all that stuff. And Wolverine on the plane is like, oh, so you've just always been an asshole, huh? And, there's this back and forth. But then Eric just kind of like wanders off. And I don't know if I like looked away for a second. I don't know how that happened. All of a sudden, he's like up on this train in the dark, and he's like taking the train tracks up and throwing them around, and he wants to activate the Sentinels. And I think it's just like Magneto's lust for power, and he wants to always be in control, and he always kind of thinks he's like above everyone else. And so he's playing that dictator role and he's always going to do it. And even though they're telling him, like, hey, we can't kill Trask, and there's that scene in the room where Eric's in there and he's like, oh, I'm actually going to kill Mystique because he's like, I need to make sure that the Sentinels aren't created. I'm going to kill Mystique so they don't get your DNA. But then he actually causes that to keep going because he shoots the bullet, Mystique jumps out the window, and then it's so cool because he like directs it to hit her, even though actually the gun gets knocked out of his hand, and then he uses his powers to fire the gun after he's let go of it, and then make the bullet hit her in the leg. It was so cool. But this is the 70s, and they keep cutting to these old cameras, which was a cool effect for a minute, but they kept cutting to the old cameras. Like, I get it. We're in the 70s. Mystique is out there, and they just see her because she transforms back into Mystique, and she's limping, and her blood spills, and then they get her blood, and that's how they get the Sentinels to warp. But Trask is like, hey, we need spinal fluid, we need brain matter. Like, he's like, we need more to complete the Sentinels, basically. And so Mystique is going to kill Trask, and they're like, no, you have to stop this because if you kill Trask, and like it sets off these whole chain of events. And again, time traveling stuff and future stuff gets confusing, but basically, they're trying to stop Mystique from killing Trask, and then Eric wants to kill Mystique, so she doesn't kill Trask, but then they have to stop Eric. But then Eric goes crazy, and it's a little weird because he goes off and he like goes to a baseball stadium and takes it up, and I was like, what is he doing? Like, why is he taking a baseball stadium? But then he has this baller move where he goes and he surrounds the White House and he drops a baseball stadium around the White House to kind of encapsulate everything. And I was like, okay, that was actually sick. And Mystique is still in there undercover, and I think it's Richard Nixon is the president. I'm pretty sure. And they actually drop an Oppenheimer name drop in here, which I thought was really cool. He's like, oh, I like the words of Robert Oppenheimer. He's like, the world will never be the same. And I was like, oh, dude, chilling and cool. And also having seen Oppenheimer now, this movie came out in 2014, so it came out way before Oppenheimer. But it's cool that he dropped that, and probably nobody understood the reference at the time. But for me, I was like, oh, that's sick. He just name dropped Oppenheimer, and we get all this stuff, and then Eric still wants to take over. He's got the Sentinels, and he's sort of turning on people, and Charles is trying to stop him, and basically Magneto, I think Mystique ends up, or Charles stops him. The Mystique takes off his helmet, and then he gets him to help him out. But all in all, guys, spoilers, obviously, they get it at the last second as Logan's drowning. They find a way to get it done, and then the future is reversed, and it's a cool moment, and there's all these cool things. And future Charles is like so insecure about it, and James McAvoy does a great job, and I think he's really good in this movie. And he's like, I can't do it, I don't have the power, I can't, like, you shouldn't trust me. And they even go to Cerebo, and like it's like he's just not strong enough yet, and he blows the power out, and Beast resets it, and then Logan's like, you can do this, I know you can do this. And it's just so cool. And he goes to talk to future Charles, kind of gives him a pep talk, and then he gets to going. And I'm like, God, dude, this movie is so cool. And again, it's time travel. It's confusing. There's plot holes probably, but man, I had such a great time with this movie, and it was really fun throughout. And the effects were cool, and it flew by. It was 2 hours and 13 minutes. Disney Plus is telling me, but it flew by, dude. I couldn't believe how quick it went, and I was just in the whole way, and I had a great time with this movie. Okay, guys, favorite character? It's not Magneto. It's not gonna be Magneto. You know who it's gonna be? Charles Xavier, and I'm gonna say it's actually both versions. It's James McAvoy and the OG Patrick Stewart because they were both so good. I mean, they're actually technically the same character, but he was kind of the big key to this. And I love how Patrick Stewart tells Logan, like, when you go back there, you're gonna have to do what I did to you for you once. He's like, you have to lead, you have to convince me. And he's like, it's not gonna be easy, but you have to get me to basically like pick up the pace and save everyone. And it's just so cool. And I love seeing current Wolverine work with young Charles McAvoy and Beast. And I just love how he's commenting. He's like, oh, I guess you're a late bloomer. And he's talking about him, and he's like, you can do this. And he's like, we're gonna be best friends later. And he punches him in the face. And it's just so fun when you deal with those kind of dynamics. But I thought James McAvoy's performance, especially, I mean, Patrick Stewart's always great, but James McAvoy's performance was really, really good. And I think he bounced back. Not that he was bad in First Class, I just wasn't really feeling it, but his performance, it was more of like a sad, kind of down, insecure Charles. And I think it's because he wasn't like as smug as like in First Class. I love that he kind of had to pick himself off the mat, and like Logan was like, dude, everything is resting on you. Like, you need to do this. So I just love those interactions. I thought James McAvoy especially killed it, but also shout out to Patrick Stewart. Charles Xavier is just an awesome character overall, and I'm excited to see how the rest of these movies play out. All right, guys, that brings us to a score. And guys, we got a new number one. This is a 9.5, dude. I love this movie. It was so good. Like I said, I was hooked from the very beginning, dude. I just couldn't get enough of this movie. I love time travel. I love multiverse stuff. And yes, like this was the first time that I felt like this really rivaled like an MCU movie. And this was 2014, so like this was like height of MCU. They're coming in hot. And X-Men was like, you know what, dude? Not many people are probably watching this, but let's throw a little competition in there. You know, MCU had a monopoly on the superhero genre, and they were like, you know what? Don't sleep on the X-Men, dude. Don't sleep on it. And it's an old trope. It's go back. It's Back to the Future, basically. Go there to prevent the future. Blah blah blah. But it's still cool, dude. Time travel stuff is still cool, and it's so fun. I mean, that's what Endgame was about, dude. When Captain America going back, and that was fun. And it's like, oh, these events already happened, but you're changing the past. And people love time travel. Okay, not everyone's going to understand it. There's going to be plot holes, but it's always fun. It was so fun to see the cast mix like that. I wish we had more than just Logan going back, because it would have been fun if like Ellen Page went back with him or whatever. But I don't know when she developed those powers to just like tap into someone's mind. That seemed a little weird. It seemed, if anything, like Patrick Stewart should have been in the mind, because he's super powerful. Him and Magneto were just kind of chilling there, and at least we get to see Ian McKellen do like a little. He actually helped save them at the end because he put all the metal in front, and then I love how they're working together. And Blink, or whatever her name was, had basically like Kamala Khan's powers, where she's throwing like these purple portals everywhere, and they're jumping through. And I just thought it was great, dude. It was really fun. It was funny. It was action packed. It was intense. It was gorgeous. The writing was really good. The pacing was great. This is a great movie. I really had such a great time with this, and this was the first time where I was like, the X-Men are a real force. They can stand up to the MCU. I mean, they're not the Avengers, but again, guys, it's like the more I watch these movies, the more I'm like, dude, give me X-Men versus Avengers, because that would be awesome. Imagine the OG cast against the OG Avengers. Tony Stark comes back and he's going against, Charles Xavier, and Magneto's coming in, dude, and Wanda and Jean Grey. And God, it's so cool. And I'm like, I loved everything about this movie. I love the pacing. The Eric stuff kind of confused me, but I think that's just in Magneto's blood to be like, he's got to have control and he's got to be a dictator. And I love how Stringer gets Logan at the end. And I was like, okay, they're kind of pushing the Stringer thing a little too hard, but they're saying like some things are meant to happen no matter what. And I think Beast says that, like, what if like Mystique is supposed to kill Trash no matter what, and then Charles Xavier's like, that's stupid, that's not gonna happen. But I think that idea of like fate and destiny is really cool. And man, this is just a damn good movie, and that's why I give it a 9.5. All right, guys, the rankings, as I said before, we got a new number one, dethroning The Last Stand. We got Days of Future Past goes to number one, guys, at a 9.5. Number two, we get X-Men The Last Stand at a 9.4. Number three, we get the original X-Men at 8.1. Number four, The Wolverine, 7.1. Number five, guys, we get X2, X-Men United at 6.6. Number six, X-Men First Class at 6.2. And number seven, guys, X-Men Origins Wolverine at a 5.2. And that is how our rankings shape up through 7 movies. All right, guys, that's another episode of House of Power. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys like this movie as much as I liked it? This was the first one where I was like, I could rewatch this, and not right away, but I'm like, because once you kind of know what happens, it's like, okay, they're gonna do it. And obviously, you didn't think they were gonna fail, but it's about the journey, not the destination, right? And it's like you go back and you watch, and it's like, oh, it's fun seeing Logan interact with all these guys, and it's just fun to see how are they going to manipulate this, and the people in the 70s being like, what is this? And I thought Peter Dinklage was good. It was just super compelling and great, and that's where we stand, guys. So we keep going through in release order, guys. Keep going to the finish line. Another episode, House of Power. Appreciate you guys. Until next time. You can change the past and that will affect your future.